Hi, my name is Brenda and I work for Laurie's Country Cottage. Today I'm going to talk to you about my favorite new tool, and I'm also going to show you one of my old favorite tools, but the two work perfectly together. Stay tuned. My favorite new tool is the SEWQ Laser Light. I'm going to just bring it forward for you, and I'm going to hold it up here so you can see it. It's called a SEWQ Laser, and it's absolutely amazing. It allows you to get a nice red line, as you can see, which is perfect for lining up on things. So what I thought I would do is I would show you some of the things that I've been using it for, because I have found so many uses for this tool. And the first thing I want to talk to you about is the corner pop. And as you all know, we love to do these little snowball blocks or whatever, and they have the corner pops in the corner. And normally what you would do is you would take and you would draw a line on across the diagonal on every square. But using this tool, I don't have to do that. Right? All I have to do is line it up on the corners, bring it to my machine. I'm going to just put my needle down because that's my preference. And I'm just going to, you can see that I've taken the corner here, and I'm going to just run it right up that line to the corner touches my needle, and then I'm ready to start sewing. So I'm just going to come down here, and I'm just going to keep sewing. And while I'm sewing, I'm aligning the corner of the tip on the light. And so instead of having to draw the line, I now have a laser line that is there, and I can just sew along there just like that. And when I'm done, when I'm done, I now have a perfect little pop that I can just press flat, and I have a nice little corner pop, and I can repeat this on all four corners. Also, sometimes when we're working on patterns, we'll have a requirement to sew just an angle onto a rectangle. So we're actually attaching a square onto a rectangle. And what I want to do is I want to take this, and I have my two pieces of fabric, and I'm going to line them up the same as I did before. But as you can notice, there's no line drawn on them. And so I'm going to put my piece in so that the corner goes down, and I'm going to start stitching. And you can see with using my second favorite tool that I hadn't told you about yet is the Sew Steady table. You can see that with using the Sew Steady table, I get this awesome line that I can just continue to sew along. And the wonderful thing with the Sew Steady table is they're nice and large. And if you look at ones like the Wish table, which is what I'm using right now, it's got a great tray on it to help keep all your little accessories while you're sewing. And so that's why I said it's my second favorite tool. Well, my old favorite tool, I guess I should say. So on to the one that we all think about first when we think of using a laser light, and that is making half square triangles. As you're aware, there's two different ways we could use half square triangles. We can do the ones where we just get one finished half square triangle unit out of two squares, and that's what I'm going to show you first. And so on that one, what we're going to do is we're going to take the two squares, we're going to line them up to the best of our ability, and then we're going to sew from one corner down to the other corner. So this is very similar to what I did on the other ones. I'm going to line up my two corners on the laser light. I'm going to start sewing, and I'm going to stitch all the way to the end. And when I'm done, I can open it up. And when I open it up, you can see I have a half square triangle. Get our half square triangles done, one very common thing that we do is we cut them apart and then we sew them back together again to do an hourglass unit. So I thought I would take a minute and show you how to do an hourglass unit. So here's the little one that I'm working on. So I have my two half square triangles. I've got my one with green and orange, and I have my one with purple and green. And I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to line up my center. So I'll just show you in the camera, hopefully you can see that. I've just lined them up so that those two line up. And then I'm going to come down here, and the same as before, I'm lining up my laser light on the 2 points so that I'm going to stitch down it at at a scant 1/4 of an inch or a 1/4 of an inch. And again, I am not watching my sewing machine. I am watching where the point is on the laser light. And I'm going to sew down, and I'm not going to sew down both sides this time because I think that you've seen me do that the previous time. And when I open it up, I'll get it so the laser, you can see that it lines up perfectly in the center. And now when I cut this apart and open it, I'll have a nice little hourglass unit. One thing I like the SEWQ Laser Light for is sewing on binding. It allows you to see ahead of where you're going to stitch to try and get a nice straight seam and allow you to stitch. So first of all, before we start sewing the binding too much, we actually have to add the binding to our quilt. So I'm just going to sew a little and show you how the laser light helps with this. So as you can see, I've got the laser light on. Okay, let me line that up better. I have the laser light running along the edge of my fabric so that I can see ahead of time and I can get it nice and straight. And I can just go ahead and keep stitching down until I've got my binding sewn on my whole quilt. But what I really like, the part I really like, is going and using it to stitch in the ditch. So in order to do this, I have to adjust it again. I adjust this a lot when I'm working on different things, but when you're just doing one thing like you would on a quilt, you would not be adjusting it the way I am, demoing all these different parts to you. You would just set it, and then you could sew for quite a while without ever having to adjust it again. So what I like it for, one of the things I think is really neat, is to sew down your binding. And so you can see that I've got my binding, I've got it clipped, it's folded over the back. And what I want to do is I want to just stitch in the ditch in order to attach the binding. And I am actually using, my light isn't quite right. I just need to get that lined up a little better. There we go. I'm using contrasting thread, so if I make any mistakes, you guys are going to see it. I love sewing live on TV, on camera. But you can see that I'm lining up the laser light right along the edge where I want to stitch. And now I can just stitch down and just keep watching it. And it goes pretty quick when you do this because you're not having to fiddle with it a lot. And again, I brought a longer piece than I probably should have in for the demo, so I'm not going to stitch the whole thing, but I do just kind of want to show you how it really helps you see the edge of that ditch without having to purchase additional feet for your machine that have the tool in them to allow you to run along the edge of the ditch. So now you can see that I stitched that. And if I had had matching thread, it would have looked really nice. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip to this style of half square triangle where we get 2 triangles from 2 squares. And in order to do that, we need to sew a scant 1/4 inch off of the diagonal line going from point to point. So right now you can see that I've been sewing all along with my laser light totally centered on my needle, and now I'm going to move it over to the 1/4 inch line, which is this blue line right here. So I'm just going to loosen my screw off a bit, and I'm going to move it over, and of course I twisted it a bit, sorry. It always takes me just a second to get this lined up, and then I'm going to tighten my screw down. And because I want to kind of sew on a scant 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to try and get it that is just slightly in from that line. So, sorry, it always takes me a minute. There, I'm happy with that. So now I'll just lift this, like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be sewing 2 squares to make 2 half square triangle units. So I have my 2 squares and I'm going to line them up. And now what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to run the laser light from the point to the point, but I'm going to stitch a 1/4 of an inch away from that. So I'm just going to drop this down and I'm just going to stitch on here. And so you can see that I'm just running along. Again, I don't watch my needle when I'm doing this. I'm watching where the corner is of the fabric. And that I've probably found the hardest to do because we're so used to being focused on where our pressure foot is. And now I need to focus on where the laser light is. So it's a little different than what we're used to doing. As you've noticed, I am working on a purple unit here because if you know me, blue and purple are some of my favorite colors. And Lori just told me today before I came, or when I got here, that Sew Steady has a table out that now comes in purple and red. So I might have to get a new Sew Steady table just because I would love a purple table. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut from the point to the point down like the center of where I sewed. So basically where that laser light is where I'm going to cut. I will then press these open and I have my 2 half square triangle units. One thing that I always struggle with is when I go to put on zippers, and sometimes they'll tell you, put the zipper at a 1/4 inch seam allowance or sew the zipper on it with a 3/8 seam allowance if you're using the larger zippers. And I look at my zipper foot and I go, and where the heck is my 1/4 inch seam allowance on my zipper foot? When I saw how this SEWQ laser worked, I went, yay, that's going to solve this problem. So I have set my laser to be at a 1/4 inch, and I can come down here and I can now run the edge of the zipper foot, which is our zipper tape, which is also the edge of my fabric, up on the edge of the light, and I can sew a perfect 1/4 inch. I'm not going to be guessing where that 1/4 inch is. I'm just going to run it down here, and when I'm done, I will have a nice 1/4 inch seam allowance on my zipper. So I'm just going to stop for a minute. I should put my needle in the down position, which I usually do when I'm putting on zippers. I'm just going to open up my zipper to get my zipper tab out of the way before I continue to stitch. And then I'm going to continue going down here, sewing at a 1/4 inch. And when I'm done, I have a zipper with the right seam allowance, which I rarely do, trying to eyeball it on my zipper foot. So after we have completed sewing our zippers in, the next thing we need to do is top stitch them so that we've top stitched the lining and the outside of our bag down around the zipper so that the fabric doesn't get caught in the zipper. In order to do this, I like to do my top stitching at 1/8 inch. So most of us don't have a pressure foot with 1/8 inch, and depending upon your brand of your machine, doing 1/8 inch on your machine can be quite fun because the feet just don't have it marked. And that's where this light, I think, is going to be so handy. So before I move the light onto it, you can see again, I drew another line on my template thing, whatever this is called. I drew a line on it at 1/8 inch. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to put my laser light on that line that I drew. Just I got to get it lined up there. I'm going to remove my laser light out of here so it's out of the way, or my template out of the way. And now I can come down here and I can stitch my 1/8 inch top stitching. I'm just going to back stitch this because I've got it set to a long seam. And you'll notice that I'm running the laser right along the edge of the fabric. And I'm not really going to watch where my needle's going down. I'm watching where my laser light is shining so that I stay nice and straight. Again, I'm going to stop, open up my zipper, lift up my pressure foot, makes it easier to open up your zipper, and then I'm going to start stitching again. And that way I get nice straight top stitching that's at the distance I want. So if you want it a little narrower, you could do that. You want a little wider, you can set the depth that you want for your top stitching. The next thing I'd like to show you is attaching strips of fabric. So often when we're doing borders or we're doing binding, we have to join our strips of fabric. And if you're like me, you like to do it on a mitered corner so that it looks nice and lays flatter and you don't have stacked seam allowances. So what I'm going to do is normally I would, before I came over to my sewing machine, I would have drawn a line down on one of my pieces on every end so that I was ready to stitch down the line. But with this SEWQ Laser, I don't have to sew that. I can just line the two of them up, bring it here, start so that my laser is in the V that happens here, put my laser here in the V that's happening, bring it forward, keeping my V's lined up. I had to double check there. And then I'm just gonna do that, sorry. And then I can just stitch down here. And it's a really quick and easy way to sew your bindings together or your border strips together without having to draw your lines. And I just did a whole pile of borders and it went so much quicker having that. I had talked about the Sew Steady table, and I just want to go back to that and just finish. You notice that I'm using the length of the table to set stuff on, and that's because I'm used to having one of these tables, but I could just use my machine. The other really nice thing about this Sew Steady table is that it does have the drawer to store things in, and it's a wonderful surface. And if you like to machine quilt, it comes with a suspension system that holds your quilt up so that you're not having to lug it around and get sore shoulders. If you're like me, I kind of do this when I'm trying to hold it up. So that's the other wonderful thing about these Sew Steadies. So the next thing I'd like to demo for you is a flying goose, or flying geese as they're usually called too, but I'm only going to make one. So this is what they look like, and I used the SEWQ Laser to make this one. So I'm going to show you how I made it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pieces and I'm going to line up one of my squares with one side of the rectangle that's going to be the bottom. And I'm going to sew from this corner to this one. Now, if your machine is fine with corners, you could start this way, but for a lot of us, our machines kind of eat the thread fabric, so I'm going to put it in that I start in the center and sew out to the corner. And again, I just run along here and I start sewing. And I line up the laser light from the one corner to the other corner, and I start sewing down. I talked previous about this Sew Steady table, but for people that don't have a Sew Steady table, my machine has caught the bobbin thread on me, just a sec. You can use the SEWQ Laser without a Sew Steady table. I just found that it went way easier when I had the table because I just had a flatter surface to work on. So then once you sew this line, you're going to trim along here. So I'll show you on the one I've done already. I've trimmed off the excess, I've ironed it flat, and then I'm ready to sew the next piece on. And again, I could start sewing it this way, but maybe I should start in the center because it's less likely that my fabric will eat, or my sewing machine will eat the fabric. And I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to stitch down this line and I'm done. So if you know me, you know that I do lots of things besides just quilting. And so I thought this SEWQ Laser would work really handy for some of the other stuff that I like to sew. And one of the things that came into my mind right away is we're always hemming pants, we're hemming different things that we make, we need to fold it over. And whenever we're doing hemming, we want to make sure that we've got the exact same depth on our hem every time. But we don't always end up with our hems when we fold them being perfect on the inside, but we want them perfect looking from the outside. So I thought, well, what if I use the SEWQ Laser to do that? And so I thought, here we go. I have my hem here, and my hem is going to be roughly, so if I wanted to set my laser, just a second, I'm going to just put my pressure foot down to hold it in place. And I'm going to just do this just to set it up because I want my hem to be roughly there. And if I was doing, like I have a dozen of these little towels to hem, I want to make sure that every one of them has the same hem on them when I'm done. So I kind of set it there. And now what I'm going to do, and I don't even have to use this plate to do this. I can just pull this out. Now that I know where I want it to be, I can pull this out to the edge of the fabric. That'd be an easier way to do it. Get it straight, Brenda. pull it out to the edge of the fabric, and then I'm going to lift up my needle and lift up my pressure foot. Now I've got it set, and I can now hem all my little towels with the exact same, just a second, I need to increase my stitch length, with the exact same distance from the end on every one of them, no matter how I actually iron them. So I'm going to just turn it. Yeah, that's pretty good. And now I can just come along here and I can just keep running along my line. And as you notice, none of the markings on my bed would have worked for where I want this actually to be hemmed. And I can just keep stitching down here till I get to the end. And then I just like to miter my corners. That's my preference on how to do these. And I get a nice hem. And from the front side, it's going to look perfect no matter, and I kind of grabbed this one on purpose to use for you, because on the front side it's going to be perfectly straight. But if you look at the back side, look at the distance in my fold when I folded it when I was ironing. So but I don't care because that's on the inside, so it's not going to matter. So just to we can think out of the box and move a little bit away from quilting and think of other uses for this laser. Another thing that I think the SEWQ laser would be really good for is if you're quilting or if you want to do echo stitching. So a lot of times we want to do some quilting, and in this example, what I wanted to do is I wanted to do it with a 1/2 inch apart. So because our SEWQ laser doesn't have a 1/2 inch line, I went and took my fine Sharpie, I put a ruler down on it, and I marked a 1/2 inch line so that I could go and move it over to the 1/2 inch. So I'm going to show you how I do that. So just give me 2 seconds here. I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to loosen up my screw. I'm going to put my pressure foot down to hold it tight, make sure it's straight. I'm going to move my line over. Every time I twist it a little, that's just me. There we go. I'm going to put it on my 1/2 inch. Sorry, I know you can't see much right now while my hand is in the way. And then I'll just lift this up, lift up my pressure foot. And now what I can do is I can do some echo stitching. So I'll just do this really quick. I've got my seam length set fairly long, but just to show you how it works. So the first time through, I'm going to line up the edge of the fabric. Whoops, I'm going to line up the edge of the fabric on the 1/2 inch mark. And I'm going to go all the way down. You don't need to watch one. Then I'm going to take, and the next time what I want to do is I want to echo stitch. And in this instance, I'm going to just do 1/2 inch. So I'm going to line up my laser light onto the stitch line I just did, but I didn't sew that straight because I was trying to sew really fast for you for the video. But you can see how I can, and I can look ahead and I can get it lining up ahead of time. Look, I was sewing straight. And I can go down. And I can continue to do that until I have my whole quilt top quilted. But what I think is really fun is to use the laser light to do echo stitching when you're working on a curve. So I'm going to come down here, and this would work way better if I had my gloves on and if I took my time and didn't go as fast as I'm going, but you can get the gist of how this works. So I did one line, sorry. And then I'm going to fight with my thread cutter. And then I'm going to come down and I'm going to line up this and I'm going to go on that other line. So you can see how I have to go a little slower, but I'm lining it up and that works as a seam guide. And I can just come around here and I can go around. Whoops, I got off a little there. This, like I said, normally I would be working on a larger piece of fabric that I can actually hold on to better, and I would put on my gloves. Sorry. So now what you have is you can keep replicating this and do your quilt. So just to wrap up, I wanted to tell you a few more things about the Sew Steady table. I love them. I have 3 of them, 1 for each of my machines. I use them all the time, especially when I'm sewing at retreats and that. They're amazing. They give you so much extra space to work on, and I store lots of stuff underneath because you're always kind of limited with your space, and it's great. The one that we use today is the Wish table. It's 22.5 inches by 25.5 inches. So this is the largest table that we're demoing or showing. The advantage of the Wish table, I mentioned this already, is it does have the drawer, which I keep showing that because I think that's really neat. Mine doesn't have that. I might have to get a new table. The other thing that we have is the large table. The large table is 18 by 24. That's one I usually sew on. And it comes in, it's just a really nice size and works really well to take with you anywhere. And the new thing that Lori's going to have available is a red table or a purple table. Purple table's caught my attention. And it is 18 by 22 inches. All of the tables come with a bag to make them very easily portable. And that way you can take them with you. And there's a little pocket on the outside of the bag, if it's the same as mine, that you can store all your pieces in. So they're really nice. We also have available the suspension arms that I'd mentioned earlier. And the suspension system has 2 arms to help lift the weight of the quilt. Makes it way easier when you're quilting if you're not having to hold up the weight or fight with it. Also on the Wish table for sure, and I'm gonna ask Lori for a clarification, has these little circles in it, and it allows you to use the circular tool. And it's just on the Wish table? Okay. And it's really neat because I've seen people do to sew a circle, they put it in here, they put a pin in, and they can rotate the fabric around and sew a circle. I haven't played with it, but it looks like a really neat thing. Another thing that Lori has available is a light stick. And the light stick allows you to put a light underneath your table, and then you can use it for tracing. If you're doing applique work or anything like that, even some of your kids' artwork, because my kids have used mine for their artwork, you can put it down on here. You can trace either onto paper or onto your fabric, and it helps you. I use mine for applique. And so that's what I wanted to say about the Sew Steady. There's a couple more things I'd like to say about the SEWQ Laser. When you buy the SEWQ Laser and you have multiple machines like I do, and I use different ones for different purposes, you don't have to buy a new laser for every one. You can buy the attachment that goes onto your machine. So you just put it on each of your different machines, and then you just take the laser off of one and put it on your next one when you go to a retreat. You're bringing your smaller machine with you, and you don't have to spend the money on a new laser light. I didn't show you in this video how to set up and install the SEWQ Laser. And the reason I didn't do that is because Lisa's already done an awesome video on that. And we are going to attach a link in the bottom of this for you to follow and be able to watch that video. So thank you very much for watching my video. Oh, I forgot one thing I meant to mention. As I was changing the thread each time, I was talking to Lori and I said, oh, I'm in a rush and I pulled my thread out backwards and I should never do that. So just for people that, if you've never heard this before, when you're changing your thread, you should always snip your thread up at the top and always pull your thread down out the bottom, and never pull it backwards. And the reason for that is that the lint will get built up in your tension gauges, and then you'll have to take it in service because it'll start affecting your tension. And the other thing is sometimes it will actually damage your tension discs that are inside of your machine, and then you have to have those replaced, and that could get really expensive. So when you're changing threads, always cut it properly and pull it through properly. So that's my tip of the day for everyone, and thank you very much for watching my video.